All right, we are going to talk about cash management. This is a subject I'm passionate about, and anyone that's ran out of money understands how important this subject is. I've been there. It's a reality of any business. Money in, money out. That's how a business lives and breathes, and how everybody feeds their families, and it all comes down to money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So what are the considerations that you guys make as far as cash management is concerned? I know you guys have been on the more, I'd put you guys in the more responsible camp and the more conservative camp. Some contractors, I mean, they're just running with a few dollars in the bank account at all times and nothing to save them if something goes bad. So what are your core beliefs there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of contractors have a line of credit, right? So they're actually negative. They're running off of borrowed money because growing's hard. So maybe just, I don't know, maybe start with just like, I know everyone in construction understands this, but I think it's good to run through it again. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so most people don't pay you right away. If you're working only residential, maybe you're getting paid pretty quickly. But by the time you're doing any project at a commercial, industrial, municipal, government agency level, you're probably not getting paid for at least 30 days after you bill. Probably more like 45.
At least.
Yeah. So you do all your work for the month, you bill, and then best case scenario, you're paid within about 35 days of billing. So every time you do that, you have all the cash going out to pay your labor, probably your fuel, depending on your vendors, a lot of times they can hold off until you get your money, and then you collect that. And hopefully there's enough left over after you pay everyone else that you've made a profit. And so that's how you build cash. But since most jobs require some type of retainage, a holding of some sort of money until the project's complete. Like I said, maybe at the residential level, small stuff, that's not the case, but you know, if you're developing subdivisions or commercial, industrial, government agency stuff, you're getting retention help.
And the retention is I mean, essentially some sort of like bond. It's an insurance policy in its simplest form.
It's an insurance policy for the owner.
For the owner.
To say like, hey, if they don't finish their work, I'm holding 10% of it.
Exactly.
And I can make them do it.
Yeah.
Which probably side conversation, but they still often require you to bond, which is crap.
Correct.
Which is crap. But
Yes.
we're not gonna talk about that a whole lot today. We're not gonna talk about that a whole lot today because it's not really pertinent to what we're discussing. So ultimately what happens is they're holding 10%. So we said most contractors are operating at a profit margin probably below 10%.
Correct.
Or really close.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, you've billed your negative cash for 35 days because you put all this money of the direct expenses out. You collect money, you pay your vendors, you get the money back that you paid out for labor already. So close to break even, but they're keeping 10%. Mm-hmm. So if you're bidding a job at a 10% profit, there's a good chance that your cash position is not changing a whole lot. You're pretty tight. You know, that's not the case always, right? Because most people are making reserve. Where this becomes super difficult though is you're growing, okay? So you're growing and your receivables are growing. Now maybe you have 5 or 6 or 7 crews. All of a sudden in 1 month, your costs are, you know, $500,000 for the month. Mm-hmm. For me to manage my, that's probably a big number, $200,000. I have to pay $200,000 this month in labor, in fuel, and those expenses have to go out. And I collect all this money, but every month that you grow, the amount of retainage held grows with it. So eventually you get in this position where if you're growing at a fast rate and you're operating at a pretty, you know, normal margin, your cash actually starts getting built up in your receivables and your retainage, especially when somebody doesn't pay you quickly. So how do you combat that? What do you need to do? Well, one, like I said, if you're an owner and you haven't owned your business very long, don't plan on taking cash out. It's not a good idea. Keep the money in there. Then look at, hey, what does my business cost me to run for 3 months? It's unlikely that you will not be paid for 3 months, but what does it cost to run the business for 3 months? Now, this is Randy's rule of thumb. I'm not sure that, there's, anything published on this that backs this up, but I feel we did this, and I feel it changed our business. We said, we are going to save until we have 3 months reserve in our company. And so for us, we got to where we always had about $2 million in cash in the business. That meant I didn't go on vacations as an owner. I didn't take draws. It meant a lot of things. But what that allowed was us to be sure of our position. And not only that, but it allowed us to grow. What happens when you grow and you're cash poor is you begin to make bad decisions. You begin to make decisions like this. Hey, is there any way I can get paid this week? I'll take a 2% discount. So a 2% discount, if you annualize that, that's 2% for getting paid an early by a month, let's say. That's a 24% return you just gave somebody. Right? You consistently do that and you're operating in a low margin business. All you're doing is continuing to erode your profits every time you have to do it. Or you start making decisions like, hey, I'm going to go do this job because I need to make some quick money and I need to be low on it because it's a quick job. And then you don't make money on it because you bid it low because it was going to be a quick job and you needed the cash. Or you start making decisions like, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to try not to pay that vendor. And I'm going to see if I can keep them hanging on for a little bit longer. Once you have that reputation, like that guy doesn't pay, just it spreads like wildfire. And all of a sudden you don't have subs that want to work for you, and you have suppliers who don't want to supply to you. So cash management's huge in that regard. It's kind of goes back to what we've talked about a lot, which is trust. Like, do what you say you're going to do. So get the money in, pay it to the people that are owed it. You never want to be in a position where somebody's check does not go through, right? Like, I've heard the stories you probably have of employees' checks bouncing. Like, I worked this week and my check bounced because the stewardship that the owner had of managing cash wasn't taken serious. And so I'd say target to have a 3-month reserve. Also, be careful about growth. So if I'm going to grow 30%, then let's say 33% because it's easier. I usually bill $1 million a month. That means I'm now going to bill 1.333 million a month. So now my cash reserve needs to go up by $1 million, right? Three months, and it's $333,000 more. That's an extra $1 million. Are you ready? Do you have an extra $1 million in reserve? If not, get the $1 million before you go after that. Because what happens when you have a bad job? Or what happens when that customer doesn't pay you? Jim Collins, once again, he talks a lot about just consistent growth. And there's a financial rule. It's called the Rule of 72. A lot of people who invest, they've probably heard of it. They should teach this to everybody in college. The rule says this: if you take the number 72 and you divide it by an interest rate, it gives you roughly the amount of time it takes for your money to double. Example, 72, interest rate of 12 goes into that 6 times. About every 6 years, your money will double. So if you're growing a business at 12%, it seems very doable. Hey, I did $10 million this year. I'm going to do an extra 1.2 million. Doesn't seem like much. At that rate, your business will be 20 million in 6. And then in 6 more, it'll be 40 million. That's sustainable. You start doing 30, 50% growth, guess what? The chance of failure increases exponentially because it's hard to keep the cash in the business. Now there's ways to do that. You can go out to banks and get a line of credit, and a lot of contractors do, and there's nothing wrong with it. But just know that banks are in the business of making money. And I've had this happen to me. We both know somebody else this has happened to.
Yep.
When they think you aren't going to pay back that money, even if they don't have a good reason, they're going to do everything they can to get that money from you. Mm-hmm. We had a scenario where we had sold equipment at auction. Cash was tight. We knew we had equipment that was unencumbered, meaning there was no lien on it, no debt on it. We said, hey, we're going to sell that. We were, at the time, we had a $300,000 line of credit that we were using. We're going to take that so that we make sure we have the cash we need to continue to operate the business. The bank, who shall not be named, contacted the people who were selling the equipment and said, we want you to wire the funds to us. And the people who were selling the equipment called us up and said, hey, we just got this strange request from the bank, and we just want to make sure you're on board with it.
Wow.
So definitely, banks they have their place. I'm not saying all banks are evil,
Yeah.
but just remember too, a lot of banks are in the position where they want to make money, and if the liability they have with you, if they're worried about it, not all, but it seems like there's at least a portion that are going to look out for their self-interest and make sure that they don't lose that money. So yeah, you can definitely finance growth through a line of credit, but be careful.
Something I've noticed too with contractors and money is that contractors, they cheap out on accounting, and they cheap out on maybe having a controller or having bookkeepers or getting good lawyers to make sure that everything's buttoned up from a financial standpoint, spending the time with the banks to make sure they're with the right banks.
Yeah.
They like to spend money on bulldozers and diesel fuel and materials because that's stuff they can see, but they can't see the financial management side of the business, and so they don't invest there. How important is it investing in the right system to just manage the money itself?
Well, I mean, that system that manages the money is the same system that helps you understand your cost, the same system that helps you be profitable. So I always say, you know, a company's a lot like a football team in that there's a lot of jobs that aren't glamorous, but we don't win without them. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes I'd say accounting is the left tackle, right? Like he's guarding your blind side, and they're worth their weight in gold because they don't do it well. You may not be profitable, and you may not even know it. You might have a storm brewing that you could completely advert. Like you could just not even have it happen to you. If they're good, they'll see your blind side and they'll let you step up in the pocket and miss it. But if you didn't pay for a good one or you didn't have one, then your blind spot's missed, and it might be game over for you. So I mean, I don't want to over dramatize that, but like they can make that big of a difference.
What are the benefits to the business with having a strong cash position beyond security? Are there additional benefits to having cash in the bank and knowing it's there?
Mm-hmm. I mean, one's just bonding capacity. Mm-hmm. Like at one point we were doing about $25 million a year, so we weren't very big, but we had $3 to $5 million in cash in the bank. I think our bonding capacity, single project, was $25 million. So the bonding company rated us as high as they could, and they said, look, we know you only do $25 million a year, but we see you have systems in place. We met with our bonding company, to your point. We met with them quarterly usually, at least biannually, and just to check-ins. How are these projects going? What's going on? How are you doing financially? So they were okay with us bidding a project the size of our revenue, and then on top of that, they said aggregately, you can do about $50 million worth of work. Mm-hmm. So one, strong position allows growth. So like we said, growth with good systems equals more revenue, more profit. Yeah. So I'd say one, growth, which is good for the bottom line, but it's really, really good for your people. Mm-hmm. And it's really good for your people to know that. They see like, hey, not only can I grow in my career here, but the company can grow. And I hear that from people outside the company. I hear the bonding company, a lot of the times within a company, you have this letter of bondability, and their people see it because they're providing it to clients, they're providing it on bids. They see that, they're like, man, we're doing good. And not only are we doing good, but these guys who do the bonding, who look at the financials, they know we're doing good.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a recruiting tool almost. I mean, am I out on the soapbox telling everybody what I can bond? No, but like I said, when people come in our doors, I have no problem saying, hey, we are financially sound, we have this rating, and because of that, we'll be here in 10 years.
And it means a lot to someone who's depending on the business to feed their family, put their kids through college, whatever it may be. That carries a lot of weight.
Yeah. If you want somebody to be at your company because you want them there for a career, they care about that.
Yeah.
They care about how long are these guys going to be in business? Do they have enough cash to pay my insurance premiums? You know, those kinds of things matter to them. And those are the people you want working for you.
And maybe they're coming from, a lot of times in this business, there's a lot of businesses that have gone out of business.
Yeah.
And they've potentially been through one or multiple failed businesses.
Yeah.
And so they're coming into it not with that fresh perspective, but with the perspective of, hey, this has happened to me before. I don't want it to happen again. So where are we at here to make sure that my family's set?
Yeah, for sure. And I think because of that, it really can be a recruiting tool. So, I mean, cash reserve, you have to be careful. You don't want to be like broadcasting to the world, hey, I've been successful. We're in year 50. We have $10 million in the bank, right? There becomes a time where you create risk by being that openly, because there are bad apples in the world who will find a way to make sure that your mistake equals their cash.
Yeah.
But being able to say and look at someone in the eye and say, we're financially sound. We will be here in 10 years, and we want you to be a part of our team. It means something. And I think it means something to your clients too.
I guess one last point, going back to receivables.
Yeah.
If I have a receivable problem, if I have way too much sitting there, and I'm owed it, but I've learned that no one really cares how much you have in receivables. They care about how much you have in cash.
Yeah.
You can't pay someone with receivables.
Yeah.
How can you manage that? Are there things you can do to alleviate that pressure?
There are. I mean, there's those who will tell you can factor your receivables. You can take a deduction and get your receivables sooner. I'd say that's not a best practice, especially because we're in a lower margin industry. This comes back to having a good financial team. A good controller can really be on top of that. It also comes down to financial controls. So we talked about job costing and understanding your job costs, but another part of that is understanding cash flow for that project. I mean, a project manager should understand, are we billing enough for this project? And then should be in contact on a regular basis. Hey, the contract says we'll be paid on this date. We haven't been paid yet. What's going on? Can you give us an update? That controller sometimes has to be the money collector. And nobody likes to do it, but a good one understands what that looks like. They can help make phone calls and really push getting that collection. And then I would also say, just as an owner, you're never above collecting, right? Or an executive, you're never above collecting. There's plenty of times where I've had to pick up the phone, and it's humbling, but I've had to pick up the phone and say, look, I need some help. Is there any one of these, like the work's been done, is there any way I could get a check cut? I got somebody else who's really stringing me along, and I'm in a tough spot. And if you're working with the right people, a lot of times they'll do that. Yeah. It's humbling, and for me, it drove me to say, I want 3 months cash reserve, because I don't want to be the guy who's having to call to ask for money. But at the same time, any one of our vendors who calls and asks for money, if it's reasonable, our controller, we talk about all the time, like, hey, we've been there. Yeah, help him out. He's done the work. We're going to get paid. So don't ever think you're above that. Make the phone call if you have to. The industry does a pretty good job of talking about how people pay. If you're taking on a new customer, ask around first.
Yeah.
Hey, has anyone worked for these people? What's their experience been like? Know that. Have their contract reviewed by an attorney if they're a new client. Like, we'd spend $500 in contract review, and some people would say, well, that's kind of a lot of money. It is until there's an issue, and then it's the cheapest $500 you ever spent.
Yeah.
So, you spend $500, even if it's $1,000, and you do 20 projects in the year. All it takes is one project, and it more than pays for that easily. So, don't be afraid to get legal advice. Have somebody review your contract, understand payment terms, so that you're not putting yourself in a compromising position.
Good. Well, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's some pretty good advice when it comes to cash management. You can't manage your cash, you don't have much for a business.
Yeah.
So that is managing cash, cash flow, everything money.